discussing a vitally important topic this afternoon, which is transitions in coal-dependent regions. And we are joined by a number of international guests, so India, Indonesia, the Czech Republic, who all are at various stages of their transitions and are grappling with issues, some of them very similar to us in South Africa, others very different. So this is an exchange, and we really want to learn from what you're going through. South Africa, we sit on top of one of the largest coal fields in the world. It's vast. It covers 4 different provinces, and the center of our coal region is in the Mpumalanga province, which is to the east of Johannesburg. So we're going to have a little bit of a scene setter by someone from the Mpumalanga government. I do want to just acknowledge up front the Premier of Mpumalanga. It's really good to have you in this discussion. And I want to acknowledge our Minister for Mineral Resources and Energy, who is crucially engaged in this discussion. And he's promised me he's going to weigh in with some very difficult questions, which he's going to challenge us on. So we need to be ready. But to do the scene setter, I want to introduce to you Ms. Dudu Sibiya. And anyone who's working on just transitions in Mpumalanga will know Sis Dudu. She is from DARDLIA, the Department, I'm going to get this wrong, Department of Agricultural Development, Environmental Affairs and Land Reform. Did I get the order right? No, I got it wrong. Dudu's looking at me. I can see I got it wrong. And she's been driving a whole lot of green economy interventions around the province, including really nitty-gritty stuff at a local level. So I can think of no better person to set the scene for us, Sis Dudu. So come and join, come up, I think talk from up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have my Premier here and my MEC and the team to show how much serious and committed we are on climate change and just transition as a Mpumalanga province. And I would like to say all protocol observed. I could see the ministers that are here and the deputy ministers and the social partners and the other colleagues outside the country. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Doc, for the invitation as Mpumalanga. Mpumalanga has a story to tell, basically. If I could just tell you a little bit of Mpumalanga, 87% of energy is generated in Mpumalanga. 85% of coal is mined in Mpumalanga. And we have a high level of exportation in that. And at the same time, if you check Mpumalanga, we are highly dependent and relying on coal. And if I may say, mining and energy sectors. Meaning that this kind of transition that is coming, if we are not going to manage it very effectively, it's going to impact us negatively, socio-economically. So if you check, basically, we are very rich in biodiversity. It's what we've noted. And at the same time, in all these issues, we have our communities, and we have our labor organization, we have our traditional leaders. We are mostly rural area in our space. And at the same time, we have 41% of unemployment at the current moment. So meaning that when this transition comes in, we don't have to look at the jobs that are being created now, but the jobs that we still have to. There are a lot of learners and students that are still coming in on the line that we have to really consider on that. So at the same time, if you check basically again in Mpumalanga, in all these other issues, we have developed certain policies. We have the climate change, adaptation and mitigation strategy. Now we have developed a just transition phase 1 plan. We have Mpumalanga green economy plan. And now we have Mpumalanga economy cluster that we established to mobilize funding and then as a source of transitioning it very fairly. So if you check all these kind of challenges that are there, it shows that Mpumalanga has to gear up. We have 12 power stations. 1 power station has already been decommissioned, meaning that we are left with 11. And by 2030, it means that in terms of the integrated resource plan, 30 of them has to be decommissioned. So more than anything, if you look at the status currently in Mpumalanga, it raised a lot of fear, it led uncertainty on how are we going to manage all these other issues. And at the same time, when we are looking at all these things, we are looking at how are we going to now to look at these issues and tackling it very intelligently with all the international, national, and all the other parts. Because more than anything, on our side, we still have the local, we still have the community that we have to take care of. Looking at the service delivery issues, because more than anything, you cannot just jump and say transition without looking at all those issues. Looking at economic diversification, looking at the same time at how are we going to make sure that we protect the livelihood of people of Mpumalanga, and at the same time making sure that we create a decent jobs for them. At all these things, we have to make that there's a justice on socio-ecological justice. Because if you check on our biodiversity, 40%, if I'm checking at Nkangala district, is already been destroyed. So therefore, we have to come up with a mechanism on how are we going to deal with that. So at the same time, if you check on those other issues, as I've mentioned, there are a lot of challenges, but currently we have a limited economic diversification, that whereby we really have to come up with a spectrum, not looking at one sector, on how are we going to deal with all these issues. So the economic diversification, it has need to be intense. But if we are going to ensure that, I think somehow I realized, Doc, that we have to hear the voice of Mpumalanga. So everybody's talking about Mpumalanga and saying Mpumalanga this and Mpumalanga this, but our voice is a little bit lower. So now we have to really talk about Mpumalanga with Mpumalanga, not talking about Mpumalanga outside, number one. Number two, we have to make sure that we allow the community to tell their stories. Our community are very intelligent, knowledgeable, they know what is it that they want, and they have best solution in hand. We have to make sure that we are ensuring that our community take that lead. Our municipalities, they don't want to be capacitated, they want to be mentored, like taking them step by step to say, what is it that we can do basically with that? And at the same time, if you look at the community consultation that we have, it's mostly now, it has to be engaged, find a sort of a consultation methodology on how the community needs to be consulted. Because each and every person will say, I've consulted the community, but how can we find the methodology with the structures that are already existing within the community to say, this is the way we really want to do that. And maybe just to highlight a little bit on that space of the community, we have the traditional leaders. Traditional leaders, Mpumalanga, they have to understand this transition. How is it going to impact the community within those areas? It's just that each and every person has been set sort of like province dynamics and geographically has been set differently. But somehow, this is what we are saying as Mpumalanga, that we really need to be heard. And in Mpumalanga, really, we need all of us to focus our areas. We have a lot of policies in place, but it's just that we have to check with this new element that is coming of just transition and transition and climate change, how can we gel it on the existing policies rather than creating another frameworks that are not going to be implementable? And at the same time, to have pilot project. If we are saying that if we close one mine, how many jobs are going to be lost, sort of cost-benefit analysis to be clear. How many jobs are going to be lost? How many jobs are going to be created on this new emerging sector? And then so that if it's going to be balanced very well, people will start getting confidence and then will start trusting us that whatever situation or sort of like a technology that we're coming with is going to be able to sustain their livelihood and give them that kind of a quality of life. So basically, this is what we can highlight, and there's a lot of opportunities in that. Because more than anything, we have a nature-based solution that we can come up with in Mpumalanga. So if you check in other countries, the nature-based solution is the most important. We are rich in biodiversity. So these are the areas that we have to look into it. We have a lot of carbon credits. What is it now that as a framework that we can utilize as Mpumalanga to unbundle or just to unlock those kind of opportunities? But we are still energy on the mining side, and at the same time, it's what we are relying on. So we have to find and be carefully, find a mechanism, how do we transit with dignity and order in all those things that we are highlighting. That is what I could say.
Thank you very much, Dudu. I'm going to invite our panelists to come up and sit, if you can take your seats. Dudu, I wonder, do you mind also joining the panel? I don't know if we can grab a chair for you, but I think it would be good to have you in on the conversation. And, you know, a really fundamental point that's being made. So, you know, where is the voice of Mpumalanga, which stands to lose the most in this transition? We often cite the slogan, our president has used it a lot, nothing about us without us. And I think you've very sharply underlined that in this conversation. So I'm going to turn to Devon. So Devon works for the Presidential Climate Commission. He heads up our work on employment, which I guess really, Devon, is the cutting edge of this transition. So if I could put you on the spot a little bit, I mean, what are you guys doing about, you know, the possibility of job losses in the coal sector? We can debate, you know, this phase out versus phase down, but in one way or another, we know that demand is going to start dropping off. You know, concretely, what is being offered to workers?
Thanks, Crispin, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me take a step back. Since 1994, we've had chronic levels of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. We have, through the last 29 years, been able to address some of those challenges, but they've got even worse post-COVID. Subsequently, with the impact of the energy transition, the scale at which jobs may be lost varies from anything between 80,000 to 220,000, depending on the methodology used and the modeling used to assess the impact on the coal sector. So, as the PCC, our attempt is the first bite is to respond to those job losses that will emerge as a result of the transition. But more importantly, we look at it much broader. How do we have a bigger impact and respond broadly to the socioeconomic challenges facing South Africa? If we understand in Mpumalanga, as well as Sis Dudu has mentioned, there is extreme high levels of poverty, extreme high levels of unemployment. Skills is an issue in the localities, and these are the issues we need to respond to. So the PCC is undertaking a series of research projects, but importantly, it is building on what already exists. There are a number of partners, both local as well as international development partners, that have embarked on a series of research that's linked to economic diversification, that's linked to skillings, that's linked to industrial policy that we want to build on. And the first big project the PCC is embarking on is a multi-year project to understand what would the future labor market of South Africa look like, taking into account climate change and the energy transition. So this is across the provinces, across the different sectors of the economy, and to understand how each sector and within each province is impacted. That is then followed through a research paper that looks at what are the skills required within each province, within each subsector of the economy, and what would the future skills for those look like. And as a third part of the research, there would be those members of society that would be severely and adversely impacted by the just transition, that social protection measures must be introduced. And the third section of the paper speaks to those interventions that are required. Mpumalanga is ground zero. It's the most affected province in the country. Eastern Cape and Gauteng are subsequently impacted, mainly through the automotive sector. Mpumalanga is impacted through the coal value chain, through the coal power stations, and through tourism. So there's a whole range of initiatives that have been focused in Mpumalanga. And as Dudu has mentioned, a lot of the work speaks to consultations that have happened. And the part of the problem with those consultations is post the consultations, there's very little that transpires on the ground. And nothing turns to materialize, to have a direct impact, particularly at a local level. So one of the initiatives we're embarking with jointly with the province is doing a deep dive in the Coal Belt region, which is basically 2 large districts in Mpumalanga, working with all the stakeholders. That's at a community level, civil society, the labor federations within the province, the private sector, and most importantly, government. We're consulting each of those stakeholders individually to identify key levers of change that they would advance, bring these levers of change together, and then advance and try to identify, at the very least, 5 bankable projects in each of these districts in order to create value chains that will lead to a substantive increase in employment within these 2 districts. As a parallel process, we're also looking at identifying a number of livelihood opportunities, and these opportunities may not necessarily and comfortably fall within the private sector, but may form part of what we consider social forms of ownership. And these are largely to elevate existing households' income levels to try to elevate them out of poverty. The issue on social ownership is very critical because understanding the South African economy, it's highly concentrated. There's a marked difference in terms of wealth gap. Communities, particularly poor communities, do not actively participate in the economy. And through social forms of ownership, we begin to get them to start participating as owners of the economy, particularly local economies and district level economies. So that's the intent behind social ownership. It's, while people may not directly be employed, but they begin through the form of ownership, whether it's through shares or through a trust or whether it's through a cooperative, begin to actively participate in the economy. And I think that will allow us to change the mindsets of our people to understand the level or the different levels in which they could participate in the economy. Just lastly, is in terms of the future skills that's required for the economy and the social protection measures, it's important for us to understand that while these transitions are taking place, there's also new methodologies of production that will come into play. And that's a very important shift in the skills that's required. So the agriculture that we currently see and the methodologies that are currently being used will significantly change. And the transition, it may be easier for larger industries to transition to these new skills, but when it comes to at a household level or at a micro level, these transitions are costly and the acquiring of the skills are timely. These needs to be factored in. So critically, for the just transition to be effective, we need to sequence things correctly. We need to ensure that the various activities that are taking place coalesce towards having the bigger impact that's required. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. And I mean, thank you for raising the issues of labor markets so crisply. And we've got to think in fine detail about what are the sectors that are going to grow, what are the sectors that are going to decline, how do we put the skills in place for where the economy is moving to, what is the kind of social support that we've got to provide for workers to transition from one sector to another, or even within a sector as jobs shift. That was great. You phrased that really well. Minal, I'm going to turn to you. So Professor Minal Pathak, we're very privileged to have you. She's a senior scientist at the Ahmedabad University. She's also on the IPCC Working Group 3. So, you know, she's thought about these issues long and hard. And I want to ask you to just give us a little bit of a context from India. You know, you've also got very significant coal regions. What's happening there? What's the thinking around transitions and how they're being managed?
Thank you so much. Just to add that some of what I will say is also part of the ongoing work of my PhD student. And so I'll speak about some of the numbers from there as well. But very quickly, as I hear, I feel like it's just, I almost think you're speaking about our context. The issues are so similar, right? And just to give some background, India's dependence on coal, as we all know, is significant. Over 3/4 of our power generation comes from coal. And just to say, why is it challenging from a technical perspective? Coal is entrenched into the system. It is in several districts in India. It provides almost 3.5 million jobs, including direct jobs and indirect jobs. So coal mines, coal power plants, iron and steel. Coal also provides revenue to railways because large amount of coal is transported across the country. And a lot of these jobs are unskilled. They are low-level jobs, but there are many jobs, right? So there's also the challenge of what kind of jobs will be lost. Will it be the senior-level jobs in the coal companies? Of course not, right? They will be the workers that will be affected. But we are sort of, I would say, in terms of planning and implementation, we are behind some of the countries in terms of thinking around just transition. I mean, we know it is important, but as you would know, India's announcement, we have agreed not to build any new, invest in new coal power projects beyond what is in the pipeline, and hopefully that will be implemented. But there are technical challenges. Renewable energy is cost effective, but we still have to solve grid issues for such a large grid. So storage is not going to become cost effective until 2030. So renewable energy needs more investment. So to phase out coal is going to take, I would say, time. I wanted to say little time, but it's going to take long, it seems. There are social issues, including employment. There are geographic issues. So the coal regions are situated in the central and the eastern part of India, but the renewable energy potential is in a different part of India. It's in the west. And therefore, coal jobs will be lost in some states, and green jobs will be generated in other states. So that's also something that we need to look at. And the fourth challenge is the political challenge, that there are power interests in maintaining the status quo, and we need to find ways to overcome that. The good news is that we recognize that this needs to happen. And so the government of India put forward an initiative called the District Mineral Fund, which is an initiative that requires mines to invest a percentage of their revenue on building the capacity of these coal districts. I'd also like to mention that the infrastructure in these districts, including the health, the education, literacy, is quite poor. So these are also, in terms of multidimensional poverty, very, very poor districts. So we've started thinking around these issues, and we know kind of what needs to be done, but I would say that that we haven't gone as far in terms of research as far as South Africa has. And Dr. Arunabha Ghosh is here, and he also runs a very big think tank in India, and maybe he might want to add during the discussion. I think we need a lot more research going into what these regions are, and the paper that I'm talking about is an analysis of 88 coal districts in the country, and my student went to one of these districts and asked people about coal transition. They said, what transition? And a lot of people are not even expecting this. They don't know it's coming. They're not talking, they're not at COP. They're not understanding net zero targets and years and net zero itself. For them, it's just like meeting basic day-to-day employment. So I'll stop here and maybe come back on some of the points. Yeah.
No, that's very good and a very useful introduction. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And we've been, trying to. There's some very active exchanges going on. We've collaborated with a group called iForest in India. They've been doing a lot of championing of just transition as a concept. So they've really helped sort of reinforce the linkages as well. So I'm going to turn to our next guest, which is Pavel, Dr. I'm going to get this wrong, Zamyślicki, who's the Deputy DG for the Ministry of Environment in the Czech Republic. And, we've all heard a lot about coal transitions in Europe, and, the German example has been cited, and the French example, and Belgium. But we don't often hear about Eastern Europe and what's been going down there. And, I know your transition's been a little bit slower than the others, but you've been grappling with these just transition issues, and it'd be really useful to hear how you've gone about it. What are the instruments that you've applied?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for the invitation. It's very useful to hear each other. I think that the experience is very similar, like in other countries, and just tell you what we are facing and what is our experience. You mentioned Germany and Poland. They are both our neighbors, so we are the same region of the Central Eastern Europe, so with very similar history. So the coal was always in our energy mix. Actually, we have still 40% of coal in electricity generation mix, which is relatively high percentage, but we expect that this coal will be phased out quite quickly. Around 2030, the goal of the government is 2033 as the complete phase out. I think everything is very much driven by EU ETS, carbon market. So it means that if everything will go according to models, there will be, let's say, no economic room for coal in energy generation around 2030, because simply carbon price will go up and power prices will go down. So there will be no model and no kind of support for further coal. So of course that's the first what I would mention is the challenge in terms of grid, as you mentioned, your experience, how to stabilize grid, whether to rely more on gas, is as well the geopolitical situation. Of course, we plan for renewables, but there are some limitations. Yeah, it's more or less the energy issues connected, but I would like to speak about just transition more, because we have 3 affected coal regions, a part of 14 in total, but those 3 regions, they represent roughly 20% of the population, so it means 2 million people from 10 is the total population. So it's not a low figure, low number of the population affected, but it's true. It's fair to say that the transformation started around 1990 with the general transformation of the whole economy. So we made some progress. It's important to say as well, it's not connected only with coal, but in all 3 regions there is as well energy-intensive industry like steel or chemical. So it's as well connected with transformation of the other industries, not only coal. Another important development is that that there are some issues. I think that the issues are connected. Some of them we heard today. It's the long-standing unemployment, relatively low economic diversification, under the average GDP per capita in those 3 regions. The problem with, let's say, brain drain. It means that young people are usually leaving the regions that they would like to study and live elsewhere. So it means that only elder people are staying there. So it's I would say the biggest issue how to sustain in those regions is to support education and future for young people. Otherwise, there is no future. And of course, that they are facing the lack of R&D and innovations. Let's say what is the practice or lesson learned is that it's necessary to have a strategy. We have a strategy in the Czech Republic from 2017, a restart strategy, which is focused just on all three regions and the activities, what individual ministries can do, and because it's necessary that the coordinator is the Ministry of Regional Development, but of course they are involving other ministries, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environment, and other ministries, because for each there is a specific area of interest and specific area of involvement, so it's necessary to have a platform. So it's the second very important step, to have a platform for communication. So we created a regional standing committee, which is important for flow of dialogue between the central government and the regional government, as well people from companies and from universities, for instance. Another important is, of course, to have funding of activities. So of course that always we had a specific funding windows or specific, let's say, advantages how those regions can get extra money or extra allocation from, for instance, modernization fund for energy. But what is a specific dedicated EU is the Just Transition Fund, which was created just for the coal-affected regions across the EU. So all three Czech regions are included. So in total, we have 1.6 billion euro equivalent. The fund was launched in September last year and has a mandate until 2029. So in this period, the money will flow to different activities. What is important to say that the majority of funds will go to strategic projects that the regions that they identify as a key for further development. And I can mention, for instance, hydrogen mobility in one region, or in another region, a specific cooperation project with universities, so that the projects are driven by university projects. Another example is a circular economy project that one region is trying to focus on reuse of waste. And what is important as well, that in all three regions there should be created regional centers which should help with of local businesses with further development of their activities, with startups, with using of brownfields, because in all three regions we have a lot of brownfields that they can be used for further economic activities, including, for instance, renewable energy sources. So let's say what is important to sum up is the bottom-up approach, not only to say from the capital what is necessary to do in the region, but as well to listen what is necessary to do from the regions, and try to cooperate and listen each other. So.
No, good. Thank you, Pavel. That's very, very helpful. And I mean, the wake-up call I heard when you started speaking, you're planning, you think the coal market is going to disappear in the 2030s. So you're planning for that. And I was particularly taken with the institutional arrangements and the funding mechanisms that you've put in place in anticipation of that change. So thank you for sharing those insights. I'm going to turn to you, Nizar. So Dr. Nizar Marizi is the Director from the Ministry of National Development Planning in Indonesia. I'm sure, as most of you know, Indonesia's also been negotiating a JETP in parallel with South Africa. They've done some really interesting things that we didn't do, including going into an alliance with GFANZ, the Global Financial Architecture Alliance, for net zero. And you know, you've got very particular problems. I mean, a lot of your coal power stations are newer than ours. And I think that's posed some very particular challenges in the way that you think about this. So it'd be really good to hear your perspectives.
Thank you, Crispian. Yes, we already engaged with the JATP, and we already launched our CIPP, the investment plan. But if we see that the CIPP and CS is really focused on the renewable energy side of the transition, so it kind of miss the thing about the just of the JETP. So it haven't touched about how those regions will transform their economics, how about the workers, how about the inclusiveness of this transition by gender or by the marginalized people or by ethnic group. It's never discussed in the JETP. So regarding to transforming the regions to be more supportive to the transitions, we are now having a cooperation with some partners to look into 2 provinces in Indonesia, the 2 provinces that the most heavily rely on their revenue from coal, and look into what is the probable or the most promising sectors can be boost or to be support to growth to replace the coal sectors. And this is still in the beginning, but we also have some NGOs that looking into the more detail on the district level on those 2 provinces. They also found that it's not, it's the founding is something that we probably already know before, that the coal region would be reluctant to do so because they already years reliant on the coal revenue, and then identifying and also developing alternative sector is not just like the 5 or 10 years. It can be take more than 10 or 15 years, because we know that the sectors will be grow if there is demand, if there is the potential, and not every region have the same, not every province and districts have the same potential. So the method, it would be not one method that can be applied to all, but we should look into one by one. And the other one is about the work, the employment, the workforce. We also facing that probably in the coal sector, in the mining, in the coal power plant, the worker is come not from only from that regions. There is many workers come from outside of the region. So if we are not thinking about this carefully, we will facing that the city or the town will be an empty one when the coal power plant is shut down, or the mining coal mining is shut down, and we will facing that there is no people there, or only few left, and with limited economic activities. That's the one that we are also found from the study. And the other one, that's the resistance from the community is also occurs in some regions, because they already know that they can illegally mining the coal and sell to the big company. And when you shut down all the the mining, including the big one, they will hard for them to find where to sell that illegal coal. So that was something that also we facing when we look into this in detail. But we have apparently we have one region that's now already shifting from coal to be more tourism destination. It's called Sawah Lunto. Maybe you probably know about the Ombilin coal mining in Sumatra that already start in maybe in 1930 or 1940, and it stopped to be mining in 1980. And then the local government is, because there's so many historical sites, they are granting the UNESCO heritage site for those mining activities in the past. And now they are looking at this as one of the source of their activities in that city. And also they try to look into their geological potential, and they are applying for the UNESCO Global Geopark. And I think that's also one of the promising way on how we can look into that the region transition from the mining to to other sectors. But yes, it won't be same for all regions. So we should carefully look into one by one, because the potential will be different, the community response would be different, and also the promising sector or the new source of economic growth will be different for each region. Yeah.
That's extremely interesting insight. So, you know, you've now had a cross-section of 4 countries and the way they're thinking about it, and a lot of similarities and also some very sharp differences in approaches. So I really want to thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to open it up to the audience now. It would be, first of all, if you've got any questions for the panel. And you know, they're not shy. They'll answer even the most difficult questions. When you pose your questions, please introduce us. So tell us who you are, where you're from. A hand at the back, and then okay, you've got the mic already. So let's start with you.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Titus Mate. I'm from South Africa, SANEDI, the organization that I head up. My question is, I think I've listened very carefully, especially what's happening in India, what's happening in Indonesia, and I'm reflecting on what has happened at Komati. And I think we all agree that it was a terrible experiment, but we need to learn from it.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what are the next steps? People have lost jobs. The economic activity has dropped in the area. Also, from a technical point of view, we've lost the base load, whatever nickel that Komati was producing. We've also lost the ancillary services, which is very, very critical for controlling the grid stability and frequency, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the plan around Komati to recover from, you know, based on all the experiences from India, from Indonesia and Europe, et cetera, to recover? Because we cannot just walk away. You know, we need to recover the jobs, recover economic activities, recover the base load that we've lost, recover the ancillary services, et cetera, et cetera. So we can take it to the other planned shutdown sites so that we don't repeat the same mistakes going forward.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Titus. That's a very sharp question. In fact, the man in running the JETP in ESCOM is sitting at the back, so he may want to weigh in. Deepak. No, you don't have to. I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot.
No,
but
that's fine. It was a very direct question. Is this thing on? Yeah, it was a direct question. I don't think the Komati was a failed experiment. I think it was an important step that we all needed to take to learn from it, to implement those learnings at other power stations. It is a pity that question comes up today now
Speak a
because
bit more directly.
we've had, oh, there we go. We've had a number of engagements already regarding Komati, the way forward, the R&R initiatives as ESCOM over the past few days. But there is economic activity that has started, that there is training and development that's already in progress at Komati. There are plans, we expect within the next few months to engage the market commercially for the PV plant, the battery energy storage plant as well, 100 megawatts of PV. It's important to bear in mind that when Komati was shut down, it was not shut down from a climate perspective. It was shut down because that plant had reached the end of its life. At the point when the decision was taken to shut down Komati, the economics did not make sense for us to continue it. You could review it 5 years later and say, why did you do this and why didn't you do that? But at that point in time, the economics suggested that ESCOM shut down that coal-fired power station, which we did, and there are plans in place to recover. There is economic activity as well at Komati. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And just for our international guests, so Komati Power Station was the first of this generation of power stations to be decommissioned. So there's a lot of controversy around it. People, said they weren't properly consulted and that it wasn't managed. And, the repurposing and repowering that ESCOM is doing has come too late in the process. So I don't want us to get into the whys and wherefores of Komati, but just so to give you some context. There's a hand at the back, and then the Premier's got her hand up. But let's start with the hand at the back, and then the Premier, and then I'll come to you, Minister. Give the man a mic.
Hey, I'm Celia Brink, South Africa. We heard from the representative of the Czech Republic say, as you summarized it, in the 2030s, the coal supply business is going to become not economically viable. I would very much like to hear the comment of Indonesia on that, well as India. Is that your experience, or is it something particular to perhaps the coal supply chain and the situation in Europe or Eastern Europe? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. So I'm going to take all the hands and questions, and then I'll come back to the panel for a final round. So Premier, and then Minister, and then Amali.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. Good afternoon. I think not necessarily that I want to ask a question, but I thought maybe I must give insight to the discussions that has ensued this morning in according to our realities and the perspective that we have around the issue of just transition in our shores, and also the issue of Komati in relation to the socio-economic impact within our province. And therefore, I want to say, Chair of the session, that perhaps we need to appreciate that just energy transition is a tectonic shift from the economic reality the Mpumalanga province has had since time immemorial. And as such, there will be teething problems and resistance from the people affected by the migration from the fuel fossils. And therefore, we acknowledge the need for us to gradually move away from the fossil fuels, but like we have learned in the Kingdom of Dubai, the diversification of energy mix cannot and must not be at the expense of the existing value chain that we have at this point in time and the net energy output that we are having. Therefore, what we want to also indicate today is that there is experience that we've had as a province in relation to Komati has left us with bitter taste It is the fact, the reality on the ground. I hear the latter speaker speaking from the tactical point of view or the business point of view. But what impact has that had within our community? And what is it that has been done to make sure that we empower our community and perhaps reskill them so that they too can be active participants in this and they are involved in the entire process? Our attitude has always been that there shouldn't be anyone who's been left out as a result of transitioning. And our take is that we really need to explore and look at alternatives ways so that we can augment on the current capacity vis-a-vis the required capacity, and of course taking into consideration the carbon emissions that we are having within our environment. One other aspect that is worrisome, as Mpumalanga province, we are at the heart of the mining sector, primarily producing coal. What we are seeing recently, which we can't even manage because it's something that spiraled out of nowhere, a commotion of trucks with heavy loaded coals being exported because we also border Mozambique. The question is, where are they taking this coal to? Who's stockpiling this coal, exporting our coal that we should ordinarily be using to generate electricity within the country? Now, that's another thing, that where are they stockpiled and for what reason thereof? If indeed the intention is that we need to mitigate against the emissions. So those things to us are a concern as a province, and we hope that this gathering will take that into consideration. And we want to say it to you, Chairperson, upfront, that we hear there are lots of talks out there, but then everyone talks about Mpumalanga. But we are Mpumalanga. Where are we left out of this whole equation? What is our role out of this whole equation in terms of decision making and being the respondent? Because when communities are complaining, we are the one that must interface with them, trying to explain to them on behalf of who. So all those teething problems, they need to be clarified. And let's just be broad in terms of extending our scope, in terms of stakeholder engagement and involvement. Everybody who's an internal part, important integral part of this process must be brought on board so that we then start to consolidate all the views and amicably we come up with an everlasting solution that will assist our communities to develop economically and socially and be in a better position and space. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Premier. I'm going to take a hand at the back. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time, so the minister's going to be the last hand, and then very quick responses from the panel.
Okay, I can see that everybody speaks seated. I'm not used to that. Let me start from a point that I'm a coal miner from Mpumalanga, Sistutu. Okay, I'm a coal miner from Mpumalanga myself. Komati is not the first power station to be decommissioned. Velge was in Mpumalanga. It was decommissioned in August. Ingagane was decommissioned in Newcastle. Calvin was decommissioned in Kempton Park. I can give you the list. So it's not the first power station to be decommissioned. What we should correct from ESCOM must not be on the defensive when we deal with this matter. It must open up a little bit. We approached ESCOM about repurposing some of those power stations. They wrote back to us and say, get out of the door you entered with. That was the response of ESCOM. We left SAF. They talked to ESCOM because that will be put on the market. We are running state utilities ESCOM in repurposing those power stations from coal, say, to gas, for example. Why is it difficult to talk to ESCOM than to talk to the private sector? ESCOM must reposition itself in terms of mindset to open up, be accommodative, and talk about people. So, Komati, I'm one of the people who always say, Komati decommissioning was a disaster. Was a disaster. It doesn't pass the just part of the just energy transition. It passed transition, energy transition, it passes that. Because you close the coal power station, you put PV solar panels. It's okay, it passes that. But just it does not, because number of employees drops, number of megawatts drops. That cannot be just. And therefore, when we have a discussion, we must discuss the just part of the just energy transition. If we don't, we're going to have a disaster in Mpumalanga. It covers 13 towns. That region covers 13 towns. I know them in my head. I know them in my head. Right from Belfast to Carolina, to Ermelo, to Piet Retief, to Endrina. You go up to Middelburg, you go to Ogies, you go to Witberg, you go to Kriel, you go to Leandra, you go to Delmas. Then you have Secunda on the side. And New Denmark is in Standerton. All those towns are in Mpumalanga. If we don't think through what we do, we're going to create a disaster in Mpumalanga. I can tell you, I see this rush of decommissioning a power station because climate change says so. There are communities there and there are human beings staying there. It's not numbers, it's people. Yeah. So my argument on this debate is that just energy transition must be just. It must talk about people. It must not talk about statistics. It must talk about communities that are going to be in ghost towns. If we don't do that, we are actually calling it just energy transition to a disaster. That's my submission.
You know, I'm almost tempted to say that should be the last word on this debate because, you know, it's about people. It's got to be just. If it's not just, we can't transition. I've literally can give you 30 seconds each. Yeah, you don't have to. Any words from you?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want to respond about that in 2030 coal is not economical. Yes, we also have anticipated that also because but that it's coming from the estimation, the prediction from current scenario, current pledges from countries. So as in the planning, we make some scenario, and that also one of the scenario that if the demand of coal both in country or in other country is decreasing, then it won't be economical. Then that's why we also engaging with the JETP. But as that is also a planning, a scenario, we also still want to have some solution for our abundant potential of coal. So the problem is maybe one of one of here is already said that the problem is the emission is not the coal. Maybe in the technology for maybe 20 or 25 years later, we can use our coal without emissions. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're on time. It's 2 o'clock. Last word, Devon?
Just a quick one. On the Komati issue, just to mention that the PCC recent report on Komati speaks to sequencing of events. And what's very critical, just one point on that. The very critical point on that is we need to plan well in advance for closures. And in that planning, build in the just transition component, which speaks to, amongst others, the economic diversification, the skills development, the identification of future skills. So that sequencing is very critical. And picking up on Minister and Premier's comment is when these happen, we need to plan at least 5 years ahead before closure or even more for these closures to take place.
Good.
Thanks.
Good
Chris.
point. You've got 10 seconds, Dudu.
Thank you so much. Pardon me, I won't take that 10 minutes. Because more than anything, if you check the human element, it's not all in this. I'm working with the community at Komati Power Station. I'm working with the community at Grotvlei Power Station. What we are talking about is at a higher level, but at a lower level, if you could see their faces going without food, you can change these scenarios. So somewhere, somehow, I think we have to be realistic and start dealing on the ground. And then understanding what is just transition. But now they are still trying to understand what is climate change. Now we are talking about just transition. We are talking about economic diversification. So we are so much high on the wording and on the studies and on the plans, rather than looking at them. What is it that we can start now? We don't even have a single pilot project that we can point it out to say this is the pilot project that we can start working on. So somewhere, somehow, I think we have to be realistic and be human beings. Because currently it's not what we are doing.
Yeah, we're going to have to end it on that note. So it's about people, planet, and prosperity. And I think you've heard very strongly the argument here. We want the transition to be procedurally just and to be distributively and restoratively just as well. Thank you for coming. It was a great discussion.